What say we?
This meeting is being recorded.
Sounds good to me. What's up, gentlemen? Good to see you guys again for another episode of The Blind Pig, courtesy of BGObsession.com. Please feel free to come by, mix it up, have some fun, jump in the conversation, maybe find yourself on a podcast getting made fun of. It's all fun and games until somebody gets hurt. Real quick, we'll run by the intros. Top left is Mark. He hails as Ohm on the board. Bottom left is Bob. You can find him as Neophyte. Bottom right is John. He hails as Boone. And my name is Derek. You can find me at Silent Threat. Like I said, jump on if you're listening, if you're watching, if you found your way here and you're not a part of the board, I'd be shocked, but I'd appreciate it. Anyways, happy to have you guys. But some small things went out today. We haven't been together in a couple of weeks. There's a little bit of change in a couple different small areas that I figure we can jump into real quick. I'll throw out there, I guess I'll tee it up with what I heard from Fox News or Fox Business today, stating somebody with knowledge of the situation who is connected to Snyder's people as well as people within the NFL are reporting, not believing, are reporting that the sale will happen post Super Bowl pre-March meetings, which is not really breaking any news. We kind of all had a feeling, but I think this is the first time it's been put on paper that that's actually what's going to happen, or at least that's what people are talking about. Inner circle. I guess it's not going to really spark a conversation with you guys, but does it make you feel better now that somebody's actually reporting this? I know there's been a lot of concern that maybe he could always say, you know what, I changed my mind.
Yeah, it doesn't make me feel worse, right? Anything that isn't Dan Snyder spoke today about, potentially changing his plans and yada, yada, yada. I live in fear every day of hearing that. So anything that sounds like the sale is still moving forward concretely is music to my ears.
Yeah, I had, we have a contest going on BGO as to when the day will be when Lord Farquaad is banished forever. And I had predicted Valentine's Day just for sentimental reasons, because that would be the best love letter Dan Snyder could ever send to the fan base ever. But that's probably not going to happen. That's probably a little bit too optimistic. But I did want to mention one thing I thought was that I just can't imagine this is accurate, but part of that same kind of, I don't know if it's a story or the rumblings that we're hearing is that, Bezos is still waiting to make a bid. And to me, if he's going to make a bid, it's already happened. And I can't imagine, like, you're not going to have somebody like come in at the last minute and make a bid and have that finalized in the next week or 2 weeks. I can imagine. So I tend to think that part of it is wrong, in that if it is impending in the next 30 days or so, it's already mostly a done deal and they're just hashing out, details. That's just my opinion. I don't have anything to base that on, but that part of it just seemed a little bit like, I don't know. That doesn't sound like the way businesses operate. Like Bezos is going to wait till the night before, they sign the contract and then come in with, twice the offer and sweep Dan Snyder off his feet. I kind of feel like if he's still a player in it, it's already in motion. But again, that's just me guessing.
Well, not just you. I mean, we've been talking about this since the news first broke that he might sell, that phone calls were happening that night. There's most of the real heavy lifting is going on behind the scenes on this thing. And we won't know until it's a done deal. And I think, as Bob's talked about too, there's several layers to this, right? It's not just the team, it's all his ancillary interests as well. The property they just bought down here in Prince William County. I mean, it's a complicated deal. So John, you're 100% right. It's not happening on the eve of the meetings. If Bezos is serious, then he's done the legwork already.
Yeah, he's not going to come out of nowhere. But at the same token, I mean, reports over the Broncos sale last year are that the Walton Penner Group waited fairly late in the process to get involved, because Walton didn't want to bid against himself. And he wanted to see where the bar was. And rather than just come in and make an offer and be ridiculously high because he had the money to do it, why? And I can totally see Bezos doing the same thing.
What's
Now,
our
how
time
late in the
frame?
process you can wait, I don't know.
What's our time frame here? One of the meetings that we're talking about, what's the date in March?
The March meetings are late. They're like the 28th, 29th, and 30th, 29th, 30th through 31,
So
something like
we've
that.
got 6 or 7 weeks left still.
Yeah, it is the very end. It is the very end of March. Because
March 27th oh wait, never mind. I lied. Sorry, that's last year's.
then
Bob,
it-
do you
it
know
looks
how
like the
late
28th.
Walton waited in the process?
I
mean,
do not. I don't know. I don't know when he got involved specifically. I just know that he wasn't involved in the first round of bidding. Now whether there were 2 rounds, 3 rounds, whatever it was, I don't know. You know, it's really funny. I mean, even after the fact, I haven't found a lot of information after the fact to be able to try and reconstruct what was going on when. It's all still something of a black box to me. I'm sure there are people that know, and maybe there are even people in the media that know, but I'm guessing it's a relatively small number of people that actually have insight into the whole inner workings of the thing.
And I guess my point is it is late in the process. I mean, we're like 2 months after the last time the media had a nugget, which was the date for final bids is Friday. Well, that was like 2 months ago. So, I mean, and I know that, I mean, that's just a date and it doesn't necessarily, and it could be wrong. I mean, the media sometimes spreads misinformation, but I just feel like if it's going to happen before the next team meeting, it's late. I mean, we're coming down to crunch time.
So
Yeah,
the
we
league
still
meeting,
have
the
7
owners
weeks.
meetings are the 26th to the 29th of March.
Yeah. What do we have? So what do we have? 7 weeks?
about 7 weeks.
Yeah. That's
In this, I mean, who knows, right? In this level of conversation, how much needs to be done. If Bezos, or it doesn't matter, we just keep talking about Bezos, but if any of the potential serious ownership groups are serious about this, they've spent the last, 3 months putting this all together and doing the legwork and doing the research. So the fact that a particular potential owner hasn't made an actual bid yet doesn't say that much to me. It just means that they're keeping their powder dry until they decide the moment's right to swoop in.
yeah, I mean, the stuff. Here's the thing: the ink doesn't have to be dry for a bid to be accepted, right? And for an announcement to be made. All of the details don't have to be finalized.
Yep.
You just have to have 2 people that have metaphorically shaken hands on things, because if it is Bezos, I doubt very seriously he and Dan Snyder will ever even be in the same room, much less shake hands.
I don't think the league's going to approve anything based on like a handshake, nod. And I mean, if the league's going to vote to approve a new owner, that's official at that point. I mean, it has to
Sure,
be-
but think of it like a real estate transaction, John. I mean, you put in an offer, your offer's accepted, you put down a certain amount of money, nothing is final. Everybody can still walk away at that point in time, right? But you've got a fairly solid offering and understanding between each other, pending things like property inspections and the rest of that kind of stuff. And the rest of the process takes another month.
Federal investigations,
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think it's entirely possible that we still have the entirety of the 7+ weeks to the league meetings to have some type of a formal accepted offer in place that is far enough down the line for the league to go, all right, we're going to vote on this. But does that have to be Bezos? No, it could be any number of
I
different
think the other factor is, I think that's pretty I'm just guessing that the NFL has said, we don't want to hear anything on this until after the Super Bowl. That just seems like common sense. It just undermines everything the NFL is focused on right now. So it very well could be that it's already done. And a week from now, we're going to be potting about who the new owner is. I really think it could be already done.
when we were predicting when the announcement was come, I chose Friday night before the Super Bowl just for the news cycle, because the whole world's going to be paying attention to NFL football. And that would be the time that a Snyder effort would be like to come out and make the announcement. But I think, John, I think you're probably right. I think the NFL would probably blanch at that. Let's get the game over. And then next week, when coaches are getting fired and all that shit, then
I think the
Then we'll do it.
NFL would be pissed off about it, but I can totally see Dan engineering a leak.
Yeah.
There won't be a formal press conference. We won't see that, but I could totally see Dan engineering a leak to Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport.
Well, if that happens, I'm claiming it.
Well, we set the rules, right? John set the rules. Was it
Schefter,
Agree.
yeah.
Adam Schefter's tweet?
Oh, is that right? All right,
Yep.
I'm in the running.
Yeah, closest to Adam Schefter's tweet. So, Adam, you're getting free press here, man. Check
Mm.
better be in the mail. That's how this influencing thing works, right?
So the ownership thing is to me, it's a great segue, Ding, into the regular off season. If this wasn't an ownership off season, we would be hip deep in free agency at this point, which to me is more imminent and important than the draft at this point. Because, well, I mean, we'll get to the draft part. I know, because the draft is a big deal, and the guys on the board are killing it with the draft stuff. I haven't gotten myself ready for the draft yet for a couple of reasons. One, because I always calibrate my drafts against the backdrop of what we've done in free agency and what holes that we've tried to fill in free agency. And this year, we've also got, oh, by the way, new ownership, which may impact whether the head coach is going to be a lame duck, or if the new guy comes in and says, I'm giving Ron 3 more years, who the OC is going to be, all that stuff is up in the air. So this is going to be a crazy free agent and draft season, just because of all that other unrest. And I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about all that. I don't know how they put a coherent strategy together for free agents or the draft right now.
The other thing to think about, looking at this timeline, so just connecting dots here, Ron Rivera has come out and not unequivocally said, but made it very clear Sam Howell's probably the guy, which is okay. I'm happy with it, because I don't want Ron Rivera or anybody in this current front office doing anything to affect the quarterback position long beyond when they're going to be here. So I'm good with that. But what it's also telling me is Dan Snyder's probably locked up the checkbook, right? Because any contract
Probably.
handed out now is the guaranteed money is going to be his responsibility. He's the one that's going to have to write that check to go into escrow. He's the one that's going to have to pay out those signing bonuses and those things. So you wonder, the league year doesn't start, or the league year starts on March 15th. That's when free agency actually begins. The owners' meeting for voting is the 26th to the 29th. So are you telling me we're going to miss the first 2 weeks of free agency because the new owner won't have the checkbook yet?
Maybe.
You know what I mean?
Well-
It's very possible that the new owner's not going to want to say, yeah, go sign people, because they aren't going to get voted yet. Now, don't get me wrong. I am 95% sure that there's no handshake rule accepted or handshake agreement in place that doesn't include the NFL, which is why I think Bezos is still in play, because I think the NFL could be the one that actually makes Bezos happen more than Snyder does, because they want him in the circle. They want that money in the circle. So they might be the ones that say, yeah, well, we've given everybody else their last shot, but you know, let's just take this one last phone call. So that doesn't mean that the new owner is going to be willing to spend the money in free agency. You know, Dan Snyder's probably not going to be willing to spend the money in free agency. So,
Well, here, let me throw this there. Maybe he is. Maybe he says, well, the part of the package and the price I'm going to accept includes the cost of this quarterback I just signed and guaranteed $40 million to.
it's
I'm just
true.
throwing that out there.
I mean, but now you've got 3-4 people making decisions where before you had one. And you have factors like who's going to be willing to sign the check, and are they going to lock down the ability to write that check because of the fact that there's a new owner in place and they need to get their feet wet. You know what I mean?
It is.
Yeah,
This
this goes to my concern about the offseason, and I don't know how they proceed in a rational business-like manner with the plan, with all the things that are up in the air right now.
I
I
think they
don't,
put together a
I
plan.
just have to, go ahead, Bob.
I was going to say, I think they put together a plan, Mark. The question is where the money comes from and whether or not they can execute the plan.
Well,
But it-
and who's the offensive coordinator? What kind of offense are we running?
Yeah, and that's going to play a big factor too. But I've said all along, I don't see us re-signing Daron Payne because I don't see Dan Snyder being willing to pony up the money to pay Daron Payne when he knows he's not going to own the team in another 2 weeks.
Agreed. I
You
agree
know,
with that.
and I mean, so ignore the fact that I don't see us paying that much to defensive tackles. I don't see us keeping our own guy just because of the finances. I think they sit down and they put together a plan. On the offensive side of the ball, that plan doesn't start until next week. And I expect us to have an offensive coordinator named and in place by Wednesday.
That would be a nice first domino.
You know, I feel like Ron wants to talk to Bieniemy. The question is whether or not Ron thinks he wants Bieniemy or whether he's doing this for other reasons, and he already has his another guy in mind. And then the question is whether or not Bieniemy wants us.
So before we get into the OCs, which is where we're going next, obviously, I just want to mention one thing about Rivera's comments today, where he basically, said, yeah, the presumed starter in 2023 is going to be Sam Howell. First of all, Ron Rivera is not exactly like the Fort Knox of opinion when it comes to NFL coaches. He does a lot of talking and then does a lot of walking back what he talked about, because either what he said wasn't what he meant, or it was misconstrued, or maybe he said it and he didn't want to admit that that's what he really thinks. He does a lot of that. So, I take what he said about Howe with a grain of salt, and he did kind of waffle a little bit on it. But I also think one thing that we've seen with Ron Rivera is, I don't know whether he's on social media, but he clearly cares what fans think, which honestly, I would prefer a coach that probably didn't care what fans think, even though I am one. He cares, and all I've seen on social media for the last 2 months is, for God's sake, don't go spend a bunch of money locking up, Jimmy Garoppolo or Derek Carr or some other, quarterback who's no longer wanted by the team that previously had rights to him. And I have no doubt in my mind that Ron Rivera has seen that repeatedly over and over, almost as a universal sentiment. There's some exceptions out there, but I think the general consensus is fans want to ride with the rookie and take their lumps and see what we have, and not spend a lot of capital, especially if we have to trade for somebody on another veteran, a savior.
Didn't he then kind of waffle a little bit though, right? He said first, yeah, that as he said a couple of weeks ago, I think Sam, as of right now, is the presumed starter going in. But then he kind of said, unless somebody else comes in later.
He doubled down on it today, though. He came out today and said, that's the plan.
Yeah, I read that little blurb, but then I thought in the same comments, he went on to talk about potential free agent or whatever.
Yeah, it wasn't like an emphatic yes.
Yeah. So I didn't get the sense that anything really changed with what he said today.
I agree.
What I read into today's comments is we're not a player in the Derek Carr sweepstakes.
Oh, what did he say? We want a dynamic. We don't need that very, very, very dynamic. Just dynamic is okay. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, that's always a good question when it comes to Rivera. Like, what is he talking about?
Was he that way in Carolina? This all seems new to me. In the last year or so, it's like he's got this verbal diarrhea going on.
Well, I think in Carolina, he was the guy. Like you know what I mean? In Carolina, they didn't hit him with the questions like this. They were timid. They were tepid about it.
Yes. Like, Coach, who's your starting quarterback? That's a hard-hitting question.
You've got a different media environment down there, but I think, I'm sorry. I can't help but think that 3 years of getting hit in the head with a bat hasn't left Ron a little addled. And let's face it, he's got to, at this point in time, he's got to get out of bed every morning and go, what the fuck are they going to throw at me today? Because that's what the last 3 years have been for him is, what is it now? He's probably conditioned. Every time there's a knock on his office door, he goes, what?
I can't play a round of golf without getting beat on. For God's sake. So there's certainly truth in that.
Yeah, but that's because you play with Mark.
Hey, how did I get involved in that?
So we do have to have an OC, as we talked about, especially, it'd be nice to have one before we start making major player decisions here shortly. So what do you guys think on that front?
Well, let me ask a question in response to that. Is Ron going out and finding a guy who will say, well, yeah, I want to ground and pound? I mean, doesn't Eric Bieniemy comes from freaking Pat Mahomes aerial circus out there? Why would he want to come here with Ron having already stated emphatically, we're going to run two times for every time we throw the ball?
So these are the guys that we've interviewed. And if I'm missing anyone, please, and Eric Bieniemy is not one of them, obviously, but the guys that we've interviewed so far are Pat Shurmur, Ken Zampese, Charles London, who got snatched up by the Titans, so he's off the table. Eric, I don't know if it's Studsville or Studesville, Thomas Brown,
Studsville, if he's ours.
and Anthony Lynn. And two of those guys are former NFL running backs, by the way. But so those are the 6 guys that we've interviewed. One of them, again, in London, is who I liked a little bit. He's no longer available. And then there's Bieniemy sitting out there, which we have to think there's interest there. Otherwise, why would we not have already made a call? And I have opinions on 2 of them. The other 4 I'm kind of or the other 3 I'm kind of meh on.
Well, I'd be interested in what you do know about them. I keep thinking I'm going to go research these guys, and then I say, no, I'm not, because I would have to really dig in far enough to know what kind of offense they like to run and what personnel they've used and all that. I'm
Well,
going to wait until we get our guy.
I mean, really, as far as the experience guys, really Shurmur's the experienced guy. He's probably the safest bet if I had to throw a dart at the dartboard. I mean, he's been an OC for 4 different teams: the Rams, the Eagles, the Vikings, and then Denver was his most recent one. He had pretty good offenses in Philly and Minnesota. He's been a head coach. I don't really care about that. Some people seem to think that's important, but he has had head coaching experience. The only reason it might be relevant with him is he was the Giants coach in 2019. So he might actually know some things about the Giants that would be helpful. But he's the most experienced guy by far. The other guy that I think is interesting is Thomas Brown. And the reason I like him is, first of all, he's young. He's the only guy not in his 50s, I think, that we've interviewed. McVay kind of found him and recruited him. So he's a Sean McVay guy. He was a running back and tight end coach for Sean McVay. And Sean McVay thought enough of him to promote him to assistant head coach, I think, last season. He interviewed for the Texans head coach position. Dallas also interviewed him for their OC position before they hired Schottenheimer a few days ago. So I think he's one of those guys that you just hear nothing but rave reviews about leadership qualities and knowledge, and he's younger. So he kind of appeals to me. The other guys are mostly, former position coaches. We know Zampese, I mean, look, my thing is, why the hell did you fire Scott Turner if it's Ken Zampese? No, and I don't know Ken Zampese. Who the hell am I? I'm just a fan, but I know that he's been an offensive coordinator at the college level, and he's been a offensive coordinator with the Bengals back in the mid 20 teens, and he didn't excel, at least with the Bengals. So I just don't know why if Zampese is all that, then why didn't you just name him the OC as soon as you fired Scott Turner? If you have to interview your own coach, maybe that's required. Maybe that's a process. I get it, but I just don't see that. That to me is like, I made a scapegoat. I picked a scapegoat. See you later, Scott Turner, after I extended you, 8 months ago. And now I'm just going to plug somebody in there. I think that would make that decision look pretty stupid to me. So I hope they're going to go a different route. And so I would go with Shurmur or Thomas Brown. Those would be my choices. But anyway,
I'd be comfortable with Shurmur if for no other reason that we know that he's done the job, right? He's not walking in off the street not knowing what he's doing. Like, I keep coming back to what a weird situation for an OC to walk into, being interviewed by a coach who may be there 1 year. And then what?
How appealing is that, right? And Bieniemy is the other guy that is getting so much play. I mean, he's got a choice between, I think the Titans and the Ravens are also talking to him or rumored to be after him, or at least interested in him. So, I mean, I don't know if you stack us up with the Titans and the Ravens, that we're the most appealing
The only
destination.
way that I would think maybe we would be the most appealing, and I think I said this right off the jump when his name came up, is if he comes in with the understanding or belief that he's next in line for the head coach job after Ron, maybe as soon as next year. That would make us a player, it seems to me, for him. Anything else, it seems to me that would be a step back for him.
So one thing that just jumped out at me, because I don't know Eric a lot about Bieniemy, so I was trying to figure out why is he the hot commodity, at least as an OC? I looked at, and I was really thinking about what Rivera has said about like wanting to be a run first offense. Well, Bieniemy's rushing attack. I mean, we know, hell, I could be a successful OC with Pat Mahomes under center, right? I really feel like it's hard to judge an OC candidate when Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are your two cornerstone pieces, right? I mean, you could be a blithering idiot and you'd probably still look pretty good with Patrick Mahomes under center. It just seems that way. But so I looked at the rushing attack because I thought, well, Mahomes, he can't really rush the ball. He can't be the rushing attack for the Chiefs as well. Casey's rushing attack during the time that Bieniemy's been there, and he's been there for 6 years, they've been 16th ranked at best for that 6-year period. They've never been better than smack dab in the middle of the pack. And for several of those seasons, they were a lot worse than that.
Is that yards or yards per attempt, right?
Yards.
Because I mean, they're throwing the ball all the time. They don't rush it.
Well, again, I'm just trying to figure out, like, I was looking for some way to judge him outside of Mahomes. Maybe that's not fair.
Well, the other problem about judging him is he doesn't call the plays.
Yeah, do we know that's 100% all the time, or do they mix it up?
From what I read and what I understood, that he will call stretches of plays, but Andy Reid will have no second thought about jumping in and taking over a drive, a series, a sequence, whatever. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth.
Concerning, because is Reid a control freak at that level, or is it that he doesn't trust the guy?
Or both. It could be both. I mean, that's what the guy's been interviewed by 16 teams to be their head coach, and none of them have hired him. Why? Like, the other thing that I put on the board that it didn't make sense to me is he signed a 1-year deal each of the last 2 years. And now I heard someone on the radio today, in the last couple of days, saying that there's reports out of Kansas City that Andy Reid is trying to push Bieniemy out the door so he has the opportunity to get an opportunity to call plays and to try to break the stereotypes or the beliefs so that they have of him that he can't call, that Andy Reid's not going to give that up.
The guy that let him call plays wants to push him out so he can get an opportunity, right? I mean,
that's where it doesn't make sense to me. So now I do start to wonder if Bieniemy's even the right choice. You know what I mean?
And I mean, that's part of the question there, right? Is he's been the offensive coordinator, but how much is he actually doing? What is he actually doing? And the Chiefs aren't going to take the lid off that box and tell anybody what they're doing, how the sauce is made, right? And so all you've got in an interview is Bieniemy's word for it. But yet, you've got a brilliant offensive mind behind him in Andy Reid, who's done it for how many years now? And was part of Bill Walsh's staff. I don't know.
What we don't know, we're talking about play calling. I mean, that play calling is a big part of it, but the game planning and the schemes and all that, I mean, that's a long process that goes on every week. You have to assume that if nothing else, Bieniemy's been heavily involved in that. He may not get to call all the plays on Sunday, but I mean, Gibbs 1, he designed the game plan for the offense and called the plays, as far as I know. I'm not sure you can do that anymore. I hope Andy Reid's not biting off more than he can chew if that's what he wants to do. But I mean, Bieniemy's just as big a question mark to me as any of the other guys we've talked about, because we don't know what the situation is he's walking into.
Yeah. I think asking the question about play calling, though, is incredibly germane, Mark. And I say that because I didn't have any problem with Scott Turner's game plans. Oh my gosh, the dude drew up some positively amazing plans. How many weeks did we sit here and have Derek show us guys running free in the secondary and a quarterback that can't find them? So
Or
the
can't
game
make the
planning and the
throw.
play design was brilliant with Turner. The boy had no game on Sunday. He couldn't call a series of plays more than once a game to save his life. He
No,
had
that's
one
fair.
really good drive every game.
That's fair. And I think that's why he's not here anymore. He's a terrible play caller.
Yeah. So the question around play calling is incredibly germane, I think. Maybe more so than the game planning. At this,
Yeah,
I
I
don't-
mean, yeah.
I kind of
And-
feel like
and-
at this level, you're probably all of these guys should be able to game plan.
And here's the thing, Bob, here's the thing that we haven't mentioned, which is, look, we have an anachronism at head coach, right? We have a defensive head coach
Mhm.
who he needs a guy, he needs a Jack Del Rio, who's isn't going to look to the head coach for a GD thing, who's going to say, this is my offense. This is the way that we plan. This is the way we practice. This is how we execute. This is our identity. And I'm sorry, but man, if you've never been an OC before, that's a big fucking risk
Yeah,
for a
which
lane
is-
coach to take. And that's why I still think it might be Shermer when the dust settles, because you can say what you want about Pat Shermer as far as how can he really be that much better than Scott Turner? I don't know the answer to that, but we know one thing. He's done it. He knows how to be a coordinator, and Rivera's not going to have to be going, what the hell is he doing over there? I mean,
I'll see. And honestly, I take that even a step further. And when you couch it that way, I almost feel like that means Zampesi's the leader in the clubhouse at the moment. And the reason I say that is because Zampesi's not going to deviate too terribly far from the Scott Turner playbook. The terminology is going to be very similar. They are cut from the same cloth. They are from the same tree. The Turners and the Zampesis go way back, right? Their dads work together and have called plays together in various and sundry places. So, the scheme isn't going to change much in terms of terminology. You've already come out and all but anointed Sam Howell the guy for 2023. How much do you want to force feed a rookie? And Rivera's got to be aware of the fact that his 2024, if he wants to be here in 2024, his 2024 is very much tied to Sam Howell at this point in time. So how many things do we change?
and we don't know one thing none of us know about any of these guys, or at least I don't, is are they going to be a Gibbs type coordinator where they're like, what weapons do I have? Because God knows we have a lot of weapons, but what kind of quarterback, what does he do well? What kind of weapons do I have? What do they do well? And I'm gonna design it to take advantage of that. Or is it going to be another Scott Turner? This is my system. It doesn't matter who my running backs, wide receivers, and quarterback are. This is the system. It's just I have no idea with the guys that I've heard listed, where do they fall in that spectrum? And that, to me, that's a huge thing for all the reasons that you just said. Because Hal's really the guy that's getting, I mean, you can say what you want about Scott Turner, but at least Hal spent a year knowing, like, what does that play call mean?
Right.
I mean,
he didn't look, when we got to that last game of the season, Howell didn't look like he was lost to me. I mean, he made a couple of bad throws and he left some things on the field, but I didn't feel like he looked lost, like he was out wandering in the wilderness, and he looked comfortable to me. Now, maybe they boiled things down a little bit for him on the final, on that final weekend. I don't know, but having spent a year in it, I just feel like at the end of the day, conservative run, and I would really like to know where the riverboat label came from after watching him for 3 years. But he's a defensive coach at heart, right?
It comes from punting from your opponent's 35-yard line when your season's on the line, because that's a gamble.
It's a gamble over whether or not it's going to be just a net 15-yard gain. That's for damn sure. Holy cow. But
nobody said the riverboat part was a good thing.
That's true. It
He's
could be
got an avatar, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing.
A sunken riverboat's pretty conservative. It doesn't go very far.
I know you're not going to want to hear this, John, but I think the answer is that it's going to be Zampesi. Maybe not from the beginning, but that's just.
Well, if it is, you know what? I'll cross my fingers. And I mean, I bagged on him because, well, I said what I said, and I'll stick with that. But when he was with the Bengals, who knows? I don't know who. I didn't go and look at rosters and to see, what did he really have to work with, or it's hard to judge somebody just based on one spot. Joe Barry, but you would like to see somebody who had more of, especially with what we already said. He's going to have to be independent. He's going to have to know what he's doing. It's hard to judge him just based on a couple of seasons somewhere else. But
Well,
And-
I
And
think
it's
we're
gonna
having.
have to be, I'm sorry, go ahead, Derek.
I think to your point, we need to have two different conversations. Okay. There's a conversation about what we want to see in 2023. Then there's the conversation about what we want to see from 2024 going forward.
Yeah, that's where I was about to go.
So are you focused on trying to win every single possible game you can possibly win, go all in on 2023? Or me personally, I'm hopeful that we go into 2023 and we come out of 2023. So whoever's taking over after that has the path of least resistance. And I think there's a couple factors. One, I don't want Rivera and this group doing anything at any position that's committing this team to long-term money. So I'm kind of okay we're not re-signing Deron Payne. Like if that's the case. If we sign him to a blockbuster deal, that is going to be that is going to affect the team well beyond Rivera being here. At quarterback, I don't want a big name quarterback. I am happy going with Sam Howell. Maybe I wouldn't hate bringing back Taylor. I've softened on that idea over the last couple of weeks at a reasonable price, and you just go into the season, take your lumps, and you develop the team. It's the same thing at offensive coordinator. I kind of expect it to be a very meh signing because it's going to be similar to the quarterback position where I don't necessarily need. I wonder if it's even worth getting the hot shot coordinator in here and he doesn't even get a shot. He doesn't get a chance. You know what I mean? Like, get a guy you have a ton of confidence in and he's just going to get blown out anyway. Why would you even do that to yourself? And then on top of that, you're putting Sam Howell through 3 different offenses in 3 years and entering a 4th under a new ownership group with a new GM and a new head coach because he had one
That's
college.
That's
Huh?
exactly why I didn't like the Turner firing to begin with. I just don't think in the grand scheme of thing that it makes a lot of sense without knowing, if Ron Rivera is even going to be a coach a year from now. But
They may
I
have
guess
some
he's
issues.
playing for his coaching life. He's got to do something. He had to make some kind of a change. So that's what he did. But
And he and Scott, I mean, their relationship, it didn't sound like it was all that great because we heard at least a couple of times reported that Ron had to go to Scott and say, hey, WTF. Those were kind of a red flag to me all along.
Well, then there was that weird thing too, where Ron told Scott he needed to start calling plays from the sideline for like 2 weeks, and then ended up back in the booth anyway. It was odd.
They had an odd
Started
relationship.
the year, didn't he,
Clearly.
on the sideline?
Huh?
He started the year on the sideline. He played.
Yeah, and I think
he
it
goes like the
lasted-
first 4 games or something, and
Yeah.
then suddenly he was back in the booth.
Right. So
I wasn't
just
surprised that he was gone. And I don't think the whole OC thing to me comes down to when they're sitting down in a room, how honest is the conversation between Ron Rivera and this prospective OC about A, what the job's going to look like, and B, what are the chances that this is a 1-year rental?
Well, and I talked about that on the board a couple of times, and I don't, especially if we're talking about Bieniemy, I don't necessarily think a 1-year rental is a bad deal for either the team or the coach in this particular
Not if he
case.
thinks he's the new head coach after Rivera's gone.
Not even that. All right. For the longest time, there were only 2, 3, sometimes 4 vacancies a year. We've reached a point now where close to 20-25% of the league head coaches turnover every year. It's very much you've got a couple of years, and if you can't get it figured out, we're going to find somebody else in this league now. And so Bieniemy knows that next year there are going to be 6, 7, 8 openings, because there's 6, 7, 8 openings every year. He's also sat through all these interviews. And if the knock is, we really don't know how much is you and how much is Andy Reid, taking a 1-year flyer on a team that's got all these weapons, and we do, we may not have the guy to deliver the ball. We think we might, but we aren't sure. But we've got a tremendous running back tandem. We've got a deep wide receiver core. I think there might be more to work with at tight end than maybe we think there is, even kicking Logan Thomas off the team. And that's assuming they cut Thomas as a cap casualty. But, with some offensive line play, if Bieniemy is comfortable with himself in developing a young quarterback, and let's face it, young Mr. Mahomes didn't get where he is right now strictly on his own. He had some help from the coaching staff in Kansas City. Now, the question is, how much of that is the quarterback coach? How much of that is the OC? How much of that is Andy Reid? And nobody knows the answer, but Mahomes and those three guys. But Bieniemy's got to look at this and go, I need 1 year to prove to the league that I can be a head coach.
Think he's going to sign a 1-year contract here?
He's signed one in Kansas City each of the last 2 seasons.
You think he's going to do that again somewhere else? I don't think he would, but that's just a gut thing. Is like,
I don't know
work?
that he would either. But he keeps signing 1-year deals, and the assumption there is that he's signing 1-year deals so that he's got the option to take a lateral move.
And he's been shopping for a head coaching job a long time. I think that's his prime motivation is would this leapfrog him into a head coaching job either here in a year or somewhere else. How many head coaching positions are still open in the league right now? I don't even know.
He's not getting one this year.
Indy. I think Indy's it, right?
I think so.
Has New Orleans hired anybody yet? No, that was talk of Peyton going back to New Orleans, but he's not. So they're keeping the same guy, right?
I think Indy's the only vacant.
So I think you're right. I think Indy's the only one.
Yeah, the Saints are going after Derek Carr, apparently. That's what I heard.
Yeah, I heard that too.
That'll be interesting. But I don't know. I think it's stick with the status quo, which would be Zampese, or bring in Bieniemy and try and shake things up, make a splash move. And let's face it, if John, if you're right, and Rivera's paying attention to social media about the quarterback position, maybe he's paying attention about the OC position too. And everything I'm reading amongst the fans on Twitter is people dying to bring Eric Bieniemy to town. Well,
he's a shiny object.
He is a shiny object.
I mean, I'm dying to, invite Scarlett Johansson to my retirement party, but I think if I'm Eric Bieniemy and I'm looking at, I can go to Baltimore.
Why? See, that's the argument. But why would you go to Baltimore? You have no control. That offense is in place and you're stuck. That offense is set. You have no control over that offense.
Well, I mean,
you can't change that offense.
And outside of Lamar Jackson and a tight end,
it doesn't matter. It's better than this shithole of a franchise, man. I'm sorry, but it just is. We have a glorified rookie at quarterback, a fucking disaster behind him. I'm not talking about Heineke. And then we've got a bunch of good skill position players, but I just.
And by the way, and a new owner coming in, and probably all new coaches in a year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care what you say about Baltimore or the Titans. It's better than DC. It just is.
Well, it's not Tennessee. Tennessee got their guy.
Okay. Well, Tennessee got their head coach, right?
But one other thing that I want to throw in here, because while we're all pretty sharp guys, at the end of the day, we don't, all of us, we think differently than guys that are coaching at the NFL level. Eric Bieniemy's been a professional football player. Eric Bieniemy has scaled the heights of NFL coaching just shy of the peak, right? And he wants the peak. These are all men that absolutely positively bet on themselves in the worst kind of situations. And they are perfectly willing to go, you know what? I can do this because I've done every other damn thing I've set out to do in my life. And if Bieniemy looks at this and goes, I can make this work.
Yeah, you're right, Derek. I just wanted to close that circle. The Titans hired Tim Kelly. So they have filled their.
Oh,
OC
have
position.
they?
Yeah.
Oh, so there aren't that many OC, there aren't
Yes,
even that many OC positions open at the moment either.
The
I
most
think-
intriguing one, that I think that out there right now is Denver. But you're stuck with Russell Wilson for 3 seasons, but you're working with Sean Payton.
Sean calls the plays, right? Or at least he did in New Orleans.
So that, I believe, to your point, Mark, that's going to be the factor, is the play calling and the offense. If he comes here, he has the offense. He has control of the offense. It is his baby. If he goes to Baltimore, you have to run the same offense they've been building that team around for 5 seasons.
Well,
And
I think
you're dealing with a prima donna quarterback who might not even be on the team, a backup quarterback who might not be on the team, and you might be running into it with a worse quarterback situation than we have because they can't find another Lamar Jackson.
is there a better place in the NFL where if you succeed, everybody in the NFL is going to know it was you?
And if you fail, nobody will hold it against you.
Because it's not going to be Ron Rivera.
That's a good point, Bob.
I mean, nobody is going to, if the enemy comes in here and the offense plays lights out next year, nobody's going to look at it and go, boy, Ron Rivera sure turned that shit around, didn't he? They're
Bob,
going to go, Ron
never seen
Rivera
any-
hired Bieniemy and Bieniemy fixed all that shit.
And if
That's
you
what they're
fail-
going to say.
If you fail,
never
are they
seen-
going to hold it against you?
right out of their ass like that right there. That was brilliant.
And that's another point. To say it again, Derek.
If you fail, are they going to hold it against you, or is it going to be just another
No,
OC
right.
in the line of OCs that have struggled here because of the shit circumstances?
Look at all of the brilliant guys that are coaching in the NFL right now who used to coach here and had lousy results here and then went somewhere else and won a Super Bowl. Sean McVay.
Well, not just won a Super Bowl, we're competitive. I mean, how many there was like 4 of them coaching in the postseason this year.
Mhm.
Well, if I'm Eric Bieniemy, I only have one contract stipulation, and then I'm all yours, Ron Rivera. The first 4 picks of the 2023 draft
Are
all
mine. Are
That's the
mine.
only condition.
Well, and I run the offense. It's my offense. You stay out of my offensive coaching. Stay out of the room.
You
I've
get
made these arguments.
you get one choice on Sunday. Do we go for it on 4th down or not?
Yeah.
Otherwise, everything else is mine.
So the
I don't even-
best thing I've heard in this whole conversation about OC before we, move on to something else is what Bob said at the very beginning of it. I think we're going to have someone in place by Wednesday. God, I hope so, because I'm really tired of looking at OC candidates.
Well, if we have someone in place by Wednesday, it's not going to be Bieniemy. Because if they win that game on Sunday,
Unless
Well,
they've
I mean-
already a handshake deal, man. I mean, that.
Oh, I
stuff-
disagree with that. That happens all the time. You get a guy who's in the Super Bowl and the next day he's up in somewhere interviewing and signing a contract. We'll see. I mean, I hear you.
John, to be fair, I know I've been arguing saying that I don't think we ultimately end up with Bieniemy, and I don't know that we're undesirable. I think there's a couple different factors, but to the point where I talked about, it's 2 different conversations. The long-term play here might just be Zampese, simply because you don't want to rock the boat any further against Howell. Give him another year in a comfortable offense, which is boring, which is ugly. It's annoying, but at the end of the day, I think it's gonna be time that we start having this conversation. Are we looking at 2023 as a developmental year to take our lumps? Yeah, it's gonna suck because we're gonna burn a year of John Allen, burn a year of Terry McLaurin, burn a year of a lot of these guys, or are we gonna look at a year of 2023 to be competitive when we're talking about 3 of the 4 teams in our division were in the playoffs, one of which is in the Super Bowl, the other which is always on the hype train, even though Mike McCarthy is now going to be the play caller and be the grand poobah down there in Dallas. But do we go into 2023 hoping we rock the boat as little as possible, maintain continuity, and set up the future front office to succeed as much as possible?
Well, what we want and what's likely to happen are going to be very different things. I hear you. I would be plenty happy to go into 2023 as a fan, looking at it as sort of a reset year. figure out who the owner's going to be, what
Don't do
direction they're
anything.
going.
Don't do anything that's going to screw the team over with the new
But-
team.
But there is not a coach or player or owner in the league that's going to buy into that or subscribe to that.
I know.
They get paid to win, and that's what their motivation is going to be.
Yeah, they get paid to win. I'm not saying Rivera's actively losing, but
Here's
does
the
that
thing.
mean that we don't sign Payne to a 4-year deal for $85 million?
Which I've been against all along. I think it's
Or-
a huge mistake.
Or does that mean that we draft a tackle in the first round instead of signing Orlando Brown? Does that mean that we draft 3 linemen instead of taking a cornerback?
Well,
Does
those
that
are the
make-
questions for every team every year, though. There's nothing unique about our
And it's not
situation.
going to be, I think what we're missing is, and we won't know this obviously until it happens or doesn't happen, but I suspect a new owner is going to, the first shoe to drop is going to be a GM hiring. It's going to be a GM
I
hiring.
hope
and
so. A true
we all hope
GM
so.
hire.
Unless they double down on Ron Rivera, the GM head coach, I think that the coaching centric thing is about
Is
to end.
gone.
We're going to have a GM, and then everything, all the shoes will drop from that. That would be the most.
Yeah, Mayhew may be a dead man walking too.
And Hearns, both of them.
Yep.
Herney,
So
right?
is there a
Herney?
game this weekend, fellas?
No, is there?
There is-
Is it flag football followed by dodgeball? I mean,
Oh my God, did you watch any of the flag football?
I did actually. Yeah, some of it was kind of fun. I mean, for
Some
what
of
it
it was
was,
a lot more, it was a lot less horrible than I thought it was going to be.
it was kind of fun, and I enjoyed the QB precision passing. You know, that kind of brought me back to some of the old stuff. Like I
Yep.
remember seeing Mark Brunell in the long distance pass and Brad Johnson. You know, some of it was fun to watch.
Hell, I remember Boomer Esiason and those guys doing that in the old throwing competitions. That was kind of fun. So we've all played flag football. Well, I was really, really amazed, or the one thing that jumped out at me is the end zone shots from behind the quarterback. It looked like all the flag football games I used to play in college, right up until the quarterback threw the ball. And there's this like slingshot of precision and accuracy that you're like, oh my God, that really stood out. And in the NFL, you don't see it because we're used to seeing it in that context, seeing it with a bunch of guys in shorts running around at half speed. And all of a sudden the quarterback throws a 38-yard laser that never gets more than 12 feet off the ground and goes into a pocket this big. It's like, oh my God.
I think that's why so many college quarterbacks get drafted, right? Because when they're out there at pro day in shorts,
Or in the
Yeah.
combine, yeah.
they all look like, Vinny Testaverde, or they all look like incredible passers, and then you put them in pads. And,
One thing I didn't like is I felt like the field was too short.
50
You know what
yards.
like it was only 40 yards, man. I wanted to see like Tyreek Hill get out there and actually get on the move, you know.
He
where
got,
he could
he got
actually-
laid out pretty good.
He did, and they played that up well. I'll give him credit. I was laughing through that whole.
They were protecting everybody's hamstrings, Derek. They didn't want anybody to get to top speed and pull
Yeah,
something.
fair.
So, I guess we kind of touched on it. Do you guys have an actual opinion on Payne? What do we do with Deron Payne? Yes.
I mean, I still think tag and trade is the way to go with him, but
I think if we can find a trade partner, that's 1000% the thing to do. If you can get anything a third or better, you take it.
I would.
Well, and he's had a big year since then, but I feel like they tried to do that last year. I have no evidence of that, but I feel like they wanted to move him for draft picks last year, and they couldn't get anybody to do it, which is why they just let him play his 5th year. I honestly think they exercised his 5th year purely to turn him into trade bait and try and get something. And then nobody bid on it because, well, let's face it, the man was pretty pedestrian his first 4 years here. And I mean, he turned on the gas this year. If I would be inclined to do something if we had seen a steady progression, right? All the way up through this last year.
Not
But we
just a
saw
sudden
4
jolt.
years of almost identical statistics. And then suddenly the guy turns in an all-pro season. What that tells me is he could have turned in an all-pro season at any given point in time, and he just didn't give a shit. It wasn't until there was big money riding on it. And all of a sudden, I'm an all pro. And what did you hear all year long? Pay me, baby. Pay me. Every time I saw a picture of Jerron Payne, he was playing charades and it was all this. And
So I'm curious, do any of us think that they should try to re-sign him at the kind of money it's going to take?
I mean, that's the whole thing. It's not that he's a good player. I mean, why would you not want to re-sign him? But that guy, he's been pretty open that he wants to get paid.
He wants to be paid like top
And more
10,
power
top 5
to him.
money.
We cannot afford, we just
Yeah.
can't afford to sink that kind of money in a D line where we're already, I mean, and maybe, you know what, I mean, we got some good seasons out of them, however you want to assess that. But that's what happens when you draft a bunch of first rounders on your D line. You're going to have to pick your poison at some point. It's just
The kind of money that it would take to sign him, you can bring in 2 competent offensive linemen off the street, like young veterans, and pay them pretty good money to come help you on the offensive line. I don't think there's any way they can pay Duran money and try to field a balanced roster that fills some of the glaring holes we have. I think it would be mismanagement.
I can't believe I'm going to say this. I spent when I put together the salary cap thread on BGO, I spent some time looking at Philadelphia, and I spent some time looking at Philadelphia because it just feels like they have a bad year, but they don't have a bad string of years. For the last decade plus, they've been right in the thick of things every time I turn around, except for a down year here and a down year there. And so I was kind of curious, what are they doing? In their top 10, in our top 10 players against the cap this year, we've got 3 defensive linemen. They have 1. We have 1 offensive lineman. They have 3. And if I'm picking the Super Bowl this weekend, I'm picking Philadelphia, and I'm picking them based on their defense. Think about that for a minute. If I'm re-signing anybody this year to big money on that line, I'm re-signing Sweat. I'm not absolutely convinced about Sweat yet, but he's solid. And he's got a big number against the cap this next year that I can reduce if I sign him to a contract this year.
Well, he's
Hasn't
probably
had one of
also
those
going to
crazy
ask for less money than Payne's going to ask for.
Exactly. I'm going to get him for less money than I'm going to get Duran Payne. I can offer him a contract up front, re-sign him, drop his cap number this year. That puts me in a position to do something about Chase Young next year. Oh, by the way, did you see that today?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
They're not convinced they're going to exercise his 5th-year option yet. They've got until May.
Yeah, well, Ron Rivera, back to diarrhea of the mouth. Ron Rivera said it might motivate him. Just say we're working on it and we're not sure, and let the motivation come. That's
right.
Shit.
Exactly. Now, I mean, I understand the idea that his health is going to be a big part of that discussion. But yeah, now if I'm re-signing anybody, it's Sweat, and I'm letting Payne walk. Now, if I feel like I can get a trade partner, maybe I tag him. But man, even the transition tag this year, we're guaranteeing what, 15 million, 16 million to a defensive tackle?
Yeah.
Nah, let him go.
Well, I was going to transition to the Chase Young conversation, because I think it all plays with this, and it all plays with even furthermore what we were talking about before about where do you want to commit your money. It's a very real possibility that if they were to decide to sign Payne and pick up the 5th-year option of Chase Young, you're talking about in 2024, the 2 of them having a cap hit of north of $30 million combined, just between the 2 of them. That doesn't include Allen, who you've already paid, and Sweat, who's in the on deck circle. Because the number for Young to pick up his 5th year is north of 17 million.
No, it's 12.75.
You also have Fedarian Mathis out there who got hurt, who we have barely seen, but I mean, you've got somebody in the wings that's going to be coming, back into the fold, that's going to be able to pick up some slack. I just don't. I mean, here's the
And
thing.
Ridgeway flashed down the stretch too, once he pulled his head out of his ass.
I just
did.
think with Chase, you know, I mean, he was out for a year, right? Did we
You're right. Derek's
did we
right.
really, was it a catastrophe? You know, did we miss him every Sunday, like to any really dramatic extent? I'm just not convinced
He's
that.
just such a question mark with the injury. We don't know if he's ever going to come back even to what he was the second half of his rookie year when he
You
looked
know, I
like he
mean,
might be that guy.
I
We
think
just don't know what
everybody's-
we're going to get from him.
I
And we're
think
not going to
everybody's-
know it until mid-season, when we'll start to really see it.
Yeah. I think everybody assumed that he was going to build off that dynamic second half of his rookie season. And if he'd done that, he would have turned into, you know, if not the second coming of Reggie White, something fairly similar. And that guy is worth the money. The question is he ever going to be that guy? And none of us know that. And Chase probably thinks he knows, but so is every guy that's ever been injured in the NFL.
Well, Chase, if he's going to succeed at that level, is going to have to develop some more pass rushing moves and be a dynamic player, which he just hasn't been so far. When he was successful in his rookie year, he was doing it on speed and burst and guts and athletic ability. He wasn't doing it on technique. When he came in at the beginning of last year, I saw absolutely no new technique, which concerned me, and a little less of the dynamic athlete, which is why he was just okay and was chasing sacks. And when I watched him finally at the end of this year, now in fairness, he wasn't ready physically, clearly. There was no technique. There were no spin moves. There were no counters. There was taking it up the field and hopping around and looking active, which is great. It means that he can run. But we're not going to know until well into camp next year, and maybe even into the first few weeks of the regular season, if he's ever going to be even the guy we saw before. And if he's learned, is he taking his craft seriously? Is he learning techniques? Is he learning to use his hands and to spin and do all the stuff that the successful guys do? I haven't seen any of that from him yet, and that's my biggest concern.
I'm just so over, and I'm sure this is probably unfair at some level, but I'm just so over as a Washington fan, players who are hyped out of your mind, hyped, and never can live up to the hype, or they don't want to be here. Like, they're here because we drafted them, but you know, passively aggressively, they make it clear that it's all about the money, you know, and they're going to go to the highest bidder. I'm so over all of that. It's just show me, get out there and show us that you're a star. And if you don't want to be here, get the fuck out. I'm over it.
Well, it sucks that we
53
can't.
Terry McLaurin's.
And John
John
Allen.
Allen's and Cam
fair.
Curls, you know, we have some
And-
guys. There's
Well,
no question
Curl
there's some
hasn't
guys.
signed yet. Curl is due his money. We'll see how he might
There's
let
one
the
that I would
negotiation.
argue
Hey, Cam Curl and any of the guys we've talked about.
they need to sign his ass.
So just for clarity, Bob, I don't know if you looked at it, but because he made a Pro Bowl, his 5th-year option number jumped north of 17. The basic number was at 12, just around 12.
Okay.
Because he made a Pro Bowl, his 5th-year option number is 17 million, which if you look at a defensive end tag number this year, a franchise tag is 19 million. The projected franchise tag is going to be 24 with a transition tag of 19 and some change next year or in 24. I'm almost to the point now where I'm like, you don't 5th-year option him, you give him 23 to prove it. And if he proves you that wrong, you either try to sign him or you run a tag game in 24 and going on, because then he's going to be a 27, 28-year-old defensive end coming off a major knee surgery. So how much longer do you want to give him 5 years at 100 million? Because that's what he's going to ask for.
Well, see, and I think that's the question now, right? They're not wrestling with whether or not they want to keep him for a 5th year. They're wrestling with whether or not next year they want to extend him for stupid money, because if they keep him for the 5th year, we've been down this road once now with Daron Payne, right? We've been down the road with Payne. Why do it again?
Right.
The only reason to do it again is if you believe you are actually going to sign the guy long term. And so that's the decision they're trying to make is, at least to me, is do we want Chase Young here for the next 6 years, next 5 years, next whatever?
Let's be honest. I stood on the table for Young. I said that was the pick. It was the right pick. It was a safe pick. I will wear that forever. I'm not going to try to hide from that. But looking back, hindsight being 2020 over the last 3 seasons, the defense is markedly better when he's not on the field. That should answer every question you ever have to have about whether you want to pay the guy north.
I think you may be going down the causation versus correlation path there, my friend. I'm not
But my
sure that
point
that's
is-
the reason.
But he's not a Cam Curl, and Cam Curl you can say the same thing about. The only difference is it's a positive when Cam
Right.
Curl.
Now that doesn't mean that the defense got better
lineup
because he wasn't on the field, but it didn't get better because he was on the field. Does that make
Right.
sense?
It does. Oh no, it does. That's what I was saying before. He contributed nothing last year. He contributed nothing this year.
Oh.
And now we're trying to decide if we're going to pay him elite DE money.
Pass rusher money, and I don't want to do it.
I don't want to do it as of today. But good thing we have a stable front office ready to make those decisions.
That's right.
Well,
know,
a good thing we have a new owner on the horizon, so this team could fuck up for the next 5 seasons, and we'll just be excited that it's not Dan Snyder.
I didn't want to say this out loud, but I'm going to. I have sort of written off the likelihood that 2023 is going to be any kind of competitive season for this team. If it is, that's great. That's a huge bonus. But with what's
It's
happening,
absolutely going to be competitive, man. We've been competitive every year for the last 3
No,
years.
We've been mediocre every
we've
year.
been
We've
just
been playing for the
we've been
playoffs.
just south of the Mendoza line, and
Well, I'm just saying it's all relative.
okay. So maybe our
No
best.
reason to think we're not going to be competitive in 2023.
What I'm trying to say is, okay, so let's assume we have another year, like we run it back, we go 8-8 again, or 8-1 again, which could happen. I'm not expecting any kind of big jump forward. We'll get better quarterback play and all that, but with the kind of turmoil this team's going to be operating under, once there's a new owner, that's going to be the conversation every day about who's here now, who's going to be here next year, what's the long-term plan, the transition tag, all the stuff we're talking about is going to take place in the context of complete question marks at the top and where the team is headed in 2024 and beyond. So, I mean, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to enjoy the ride because Dan Snyder
Amen,
is,
brother.
So-
ding dong, the witch is dead. And
I was gonna
I will
say-
celebrate that the entire year.
I was gonna say the Cowboy fans are gonna come up to us and say, "You guys suck. We're better than you." Yeah, but at least we don't have Dan Snyder anymore.
Oh
and
my
we'll have a
God,
big old
everything
smile on our face
changes.
when we say it.
Everything changes the minute that sales. I'm not saying the new guy's going to come in and start winning Super Bowls. I'm
But
just
he's
saying he's
not
not going to
Dan
be
Snyder.
Dan Snyder. There's really very little way to go other than up.
Do you guys realize that we were 8-1 and missed the playoffs by a game, and we get a last place schedule this next year?
There's a silver lining.
Think about that. We get a last place schedule.
Yeah, the sad thing is we had a last place schedule last year, and it was supposed to be the worst in the entire NFL. And what did we do with it?
Yeah.
I know, but it turned out to not be. I mean, look, the Detroit Lions became real this year.
The Jaguars made the playoffs.
The Jaguars, although we get the who was it? Mark said it, and he's right. We were lucky we got them early.
By the end of the year, we wouldn't have beaten that team.
No.
And the same thing will happen next year, guys. Teams that were going to be up are going to be down and vice versa. So I don't put a whole lot into that. What I do put a lot into is, are we playing a division that's stacked with AFC West type of quarterbacks?
Well, we know our
You know,
opponents.
We know our opponents, so we can do a little bit of scouting on that. We got away with playing a bunch of mediocre quarterbacks this year, and we went 500. So because we had a mediocre quarterback.
We have NFC West, so we have Cardinals, Niners, Seahawks, and Rams.
And I got
We have AFC East, so we
I'm
have
okay with
Bills,
that.
Dolphins, Patriots, and who am I missing?
Jets. All right, so
Yeah,
there's no quarterback gauntlet there. So we have a chance.
We have
In the AFC
Niners.
West, we're in big trouble, and the NFC North, right? With the Vikings.
Has Aaron Rodgers come out of his dark room in a Jets uniform yet?
He
Does
hasn't
anyone
even
know?
gone. Oh yeah, that guy.
That's
That
where
guy-
he
Yeah,
needs, that's what
60
needs to
million
happen,
reasons
right?
why he's
That's
gonna
where
come
he
out of
needs
there.
to go.
He's got 32 jerseys hanging in random order on on a rack in his
Yep.
dark room, and whichever one he comes out wearing is the team he's going to play
So
for.
if Aaron Rodgers sees his shadow in 3 days, does that mean the Jets are a playoff team? How does that work? I don't know.
Just so he doesn't come here. Good God.
You know, if he walks away this year, I'm pretty sure he's gonna fix it so Tom Brady skates. You realize right now the Bucks are on the hook for like a $35 million cap hit with Brady retiring this year. I mean, it's a stupid cap hit that Brady has left them with. If Rodgers decides he's going to hang it
Hold
up,
on, I
he's
think
going to do worse to
retirement-
the Packers.
I think retirement
I
voids
read an
the
article
dead
about
cap
it.
number.
I read an article about it that said the best thing Tom Brady could do for Tampa Bay right now would be to actually sign a new contract for 2024 and retire after June 1. Sign a vet minimum, and then they could spread that cap hit out over 2 years. But as it stands right now, they got to swallow it this year because they signed him to a 2-year deal worth like $70 million or something.
Boy, Todd
Easy.
Bowles' life changed in 1 year, didn't it? He thought he was on top of the fucking world.
Yep. Now he needs a quarterback and has no money to sign one.
Yeah.
No, they signed, who's their backup? They signed that kid that we liked.
Kyle
Is it
Trask.
Trask, yeah.
Yeah.
He, the savior. He's coming.
Come on, guys. We need to talk about the Super Bowl this weekend. I know John's not watching it, so the rest of us will talk.
Well, he's gonna watch it for Rihanna and hope there's a wardrobe malfunction. That's the
There you go.
So, are you
So-
kidding me? Just type in Rihanna in Google, you'll find enough wardrobe malfunction.
Let's just start with the obvious. Does anyone think that KC wins this game? I do not think.
I can't find it in myself to believe they win this game. Because bad things happen to us as Redskins fans. They have forever.
No, I don't. I see, and I don't think it. If I were betting, I'd be betting on Philadelphia, but I wouldn't be betting on Philadelphia because of the offense. I'd be betting on Philadelphia because of the defense. But having said that, Kansas City has two guys that make me believe that this will be a football game. One of those is Pat Mahomes.
Reed.
The other
one's
one is
calling
Steve
plays.
Spagnuolo.
Oh,
How many times have we been on the wrong end of a Steve Spagnuolo brilliant game where the guy has just engineered well above the level of his players?
He's had 2 weeks.
Exactly. Steve Spagnuolo has 2 weeks and he's playing against a guy that he's not healthy. Philadelphia's quarterback's not healthy. I can't remember. Jalen Hurts. Hurts is not completely healthy at this point. Of course, neither is Mahomes either. But I'll tell you what, I'm taking Mahomes on his deathbed ahead of almost any other quarterback in the NFL healthy. So
right now, yeah, you're right.
It's kind of crazy because you literally have like the top rushing offense in the league in Philly going against the top dominating passing offense in Kansas City. So I'm looking at special teams. Well, I'm not looking at special teams. I'm looking at turnovers as the difference, because if you look at Philadelphia, they were fourth in the fewest turnovers on offense. They were the fifth in the league in forcing turnovers. You look at Kansas City was 17th with the most turnovers and 20th in defensive turnovers. So that's like a pretty glaring difference to me. So I could see it becoming a game where Mahomes looks great and Mahomes is doing whatever he wants, but they keep turning the ball over. And Philadelphia, the other thing that I think is a factor, and I know Patrick Mahomes would deny this and Andy Reid would deny it, but I just think Philadelphia is going to be the hungrier team, man. You've got a new head coach that's never been to a Super Bowl. You've got a quarterback who's coming off a Pro Bowl season, who's never been to a Super Bowl. Andy Reid and Mahomes, they probably figure we can go to the Super Bowl any year we want, and they've already been once. I'm not saying it's not a big deal. I just think there's a difference in the mindset of a team that hasn't been there before. And I know KC has a bunch of new players on the team from the last time they were there, but I just I'll tell you the other thing. Philadelphia kicked the ever-loving hell out of San Francisco, and I did not see that coming. I think everything I read prior to that game was that San Francisco was more physical. San Francisco defense was going to shut Philly down, and they got spanked. They got spanked almost across the board in that game, out efforted, out physicaled. And then I look at KC, who barely got by in there to get here. What some people would say with a little help. I don't know if I buy into that, but I just think Philadelphia looks hungrier, and I think they have more to play for. That's all I got.
If I was betting money, I would bet on Philly for a lot of the reasons that you guys have already said. Also, I think they're more balanced across the board. And heading into at least the AFC Championship game, I was convinced that Kansas City had a problem on defense, that their pass defense was suspect. They rose up and played a much better game against Joe Burrow than I expected them to. So I have hope that Charles Jones can come in and be as disruptive as he can be, and that defense can hold their own. Reasons why I hold out hope. I will be pulling for Kansas City. I've always been a bit of a closet KC guy, even before Mahomes. I go back to Len Dawson, for God's sake. But the Eagles come in feeling pretty good about themselves. They spanked a Giants team that I think the clock struck midnight for the Giants in that game. They were exposed as the team that we kind of knew they were. They were about as good as the Commanders were. Had no business in that deep in the playoffs. And then they played a San Francisco team that I agree that by the end of the game, it looked like Philly had dominated them. That game was pretty much back and forth, dead even with Josh Johnson in the game for a couple of series. It's going to be a one-score game at halftime before Johnson fumbles a snap and can't recover it, and Philly gets a gift touchdown right before the half. And that game was over then because they had no quarterback. So I'm not sure. What I'm saying is Philly has been impressive in the playoffs. I don't think they're quite the juggernaut that the media hype builds them up over 2 weeks. I think KC has the wild card in the game. The best player in the field is going to be number 15 in red. Kelsey is good. Bieniemy, our future OC and head coach, is good. Andy Reid is good.
Andy Reid is a hell of a coach.
I think it's going to be a very good game that will probably turn on it's going to a fourth quarter game that turns on a turnover, like John was saying, on great players making great plays. I would bet Philly for all the reasons I was saying, but put a big asterisk. This is why I don't bet. Because I can very easily see KC coming out and doing exactly what we'd think if they were completely healthy and hadn't stumbled defensively a little bit this year. I would be picking them happily. So I'll be rooting KC, but betting I'll bet $1 on Philly.
You know, I'd be betting on Philadelphia, but it wouldn't be by much. I don't know what the over under is on this game, or I don't know what the spread is on this game, but I'm betting on anybody to cover at this point in time. I think it'll be a close game. But I look at the last 3 years. Kansas City's been there. This is their third Super Bowl in 4 years. I don't remember the last time a team did that. Well, I guess the Buffalo Bills when they went 4 out of 4, right?
The Patriots did it, didn't they?
Three times in 4 years? Yeah, probably under Brady. You're probably correct. But I'd be hard pressed to name the years. So there you go. But their last experience was a 31-9 ass whooping at the hands of one Mr. Tom Brady. So their most recent taste of this game is what it feels like to sit there through the offseason knowing you were that close and couldn't put it together. That's gotta sting. I don't know.
He was hurt in that game too, wasn't he? He was limited.
And the other thing is, you go to this game 3 times in 4 years. I don't want to say it's not special anymore, but it becomes another game. Philadelphia is very young.
The pressure factor is lessened.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Philadelphia is very young.
Mm-hmm. Including their head coach. I mean,
yes.
everybody 18 months ago, everybody thought the guy was a chowderhead. You know what I mean? Like,
well, he is, but
he was playing rock, paper, scissors when he was interviewing players at the combine. So it's going to be. I think honestly, if you took the coaching out of it and you had the same coach on both sides, I think the Eagles win the game. I think it's going to come down to Andy Reid is comfortable. He's been here multiple times across different teams. I mean, I think he's still gonna have butterflies. He's still gonna get anxious and excited. It's Super Bowl, but I don't think he's gonna let the moment get too big for him. I don't think he's gonna have those decisions that are made by people that overthink because they're afraid of messing up. He's not gonna do that, and I think he's gonna be prepared. But I think it's going to be a dogfight. I think it's going to be a higher scoring game than people realize, but I think it's going to be just a heavyweight fight. And I could see it coming down to the final possession.
Yeah, that's
I
my
don't see a
prediction.
blowout. Huh?
That's my prediction. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a hell of a football game.
I hope it's the end of the third quarter and Kansas City's up by 17 or 20, but I don't see it happening.
Well, I would not be surprised. I know I talk about Mahomes too much and Paul accuses me. It's my BFF, I guess. But by the way, somebody needs to read. I'll do it. Paul made his prediction. We will read what Paul had to say. He couldn't be with us tonight. Talk amongst yourselves while I look that up.
Chris Jones is going to have to wreak havoc, and he's going to have to do it very controlled so that Jalen Hurts doesn't just go run roughshod.
Another stat that jumped out at me, I was just looking to see if there were any glaring, advantages on one side or the other. I noticed that Philly per drive averages 11 plays. Kansas City averages 6 plays per drive. So I guess that speaks to as many, when you're setting scoring records and passing records, that speaks to explosiveness, like a pretty dramatic difference.
Like you need a lot of possessions. You can't be fucking around with 12-play drives.
Well, it also speaks to time on the field for the defense.
Mm-hmm. So Canadian Hog, Paul, in absentia tonight. For his sake, hope KC wins, or else I'll be dealing with a crushed child at home. I hear you, Paul. My head tells me Philly wins, more physical along both fronts, and I think they'll be motivated to make a statement, given how all the chatter has been about them being able to cruise into the Super Bowl after playing a quarterback-less San Francisco team. Health of KC also concerns me. Eagles 27, Chiefs 24.
I have it Eagles 34, KC 17. So I have it
Oof.
more.
Oh, you got a bigger one. I got like 30-27 Eagles. But I really want to say like 41-29 KC.
Oh,
Just
it's
big.
If we're talking about what I want to say about 41-0. That's what I want to say.
By the way, I voted Sirianni, the Eagles coach, as the coach I'd most like to punch that smug look off his face.
Yeah. He's a perfect coach for that fan
Oh
base.
my God.
Well, and that's,
dude.
I think that's part of the reason I just can't count Kansas City out is there is an arrogance about Philly. You need a certain level of arrogance. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the Patriots oozed a certain level of arrogance. But with the Patriots, there were years of backing it up. You just knew. Philadelphia doesn't have years of backing it up under this guy. They've got, 2 seasons now under Sirianni?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I don't know.
I will not be surprised if KC pulls this thing out.
No,
I think they got the better head coach. They got the better quarterback. That says
I hope so. I hope so.
Going up against the Eagles had the number 1 passing defense in the entire league. So it's not going to be a cakewalk if they're relying on Mahomes.
You know why they had the number 1 passing defense in the league?
Because they allowed
they can't stop the run.
Because they were legitimately second all time in sacks in a single season. That pass rush is ferocious.
Nobody gets rid of the ball quicker than Patrick Mahomes. He's
And that's where
waiting.
Andy Reid built his life. Remember back to the Brian Westbrook days.
I saw a stat today. I think I have this right, that Patrick Mahomes was not sacked on a scramble the entire year this year. In other words, he never was caught in the
Running.
backfield scramble for an entire year. So anyway,
He throws it away and does all that stuff. But anyway, anybody who's still hanging with us an hour and a half in an off-season pod, thank you. We appreciate you.
Very much so. But gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. We probably should cut the thing off. Jesus.
Yeah, come see us at BG Obsession.
Yeah, come by and see us. And I think we'll probably peg this for our next pod. I don't know if we'll schedule it next week, but
Well,
we
Bob's
might
already
want
said-
to because the news
Bob's
might
just
be
told
coming.
us we're gonna have an OC on Wednesday, so we'll have to do a reaction
All
pod.
right. Well, then we will plan on being back next week.
if you're not a Commanders fan, you can still come to BGO because we have a raging homoerotic discussion going on about this Last of Us series on
The last
HBO.
I'm not sure that that's a selling point, John.
I'm having a
The
good time.
discussion
Yeah,
might be, the description of the discussion might not be.
We might have to edit that one out, man. Thank you, gentlemen.
On that note, it's been a pleasure. Night, boys.
Guys.